And we are live. How about that? So for those tuning in, we were just talking about how smooth I am at this whole interview process, and Emily just got the behind the scenes of getting ready for this wild endeavor. So, but I'm sure this is going to be the best one so far. Yeah.
No pressure. No pressure.
No pressure. But for those that are tuning in, either live or when we push out the podcast version of this, my name is Kevin Lancaster, CEO of Channel Program, and the goal of this program is to kind of bring some behind the scenes action to what's going on in the lives, in the world of the CEOs of the leading vendors that you're working with day in and day out in the channel. And so this week, I'm extremely fortunate to have Emily joining me on today's episode. So I guess, why don't you give a quick rundown background of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Sure.
You make it sound like my life might be more interesting or different than anybody else who's listening, but there might be more similarities than differences. So I'm the CEO of Synchro. I've been in the MSP space for a while, so if there are any partners out there listening, they've probably encountered me before. But I grew up in Montreal. I lived there for a long time and moved to the Boston area about 20 years ago and have been here ever since. And was lucky enough to fall into the MSP space through an acquisition. So didn't know anything about MSPs. But got my company that I was working at, Backupify, was acquired by Datto back in 2014. And that's when I first became acquainted with what an MSP was, what their business was about, and sort of fell in love with the space. Tried a few things, and now I'm back as CEO of Syncro and happy to be back.
Awesome. Very cool. So you kind of kicked it off. It's interesting. There are a lot of commonalities, a lot of similarities, especially the first 5 or 6 episodes that we've done. Obviously, everyone comes from different backgrounds and different origin stories, but some of the progressions there's interesting or eerily interesting parallels between the guests, and I'm sure we might see some of those in your background. Maybe not. Maybe
all good things, right? All good things.
Complete curveball. But all right, let's take let's go to the Wayback Machine. Let's take a step back. You mentioned I guess formative years where you grew up in Montreal. I guess take us back to Montreal growing up.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm still a Canadian citizen and proud to be a dual citizen now of the U.S. and Canada. But yeah, I grew up in Montreal, went to school there, and had my first sort of job there. So I went to McGill University, which is stereotypical Montreal school for computer engineering, at a time where computer engineering was sort of half and mostly hardware engineering and a little bit of software engineering and like computer science. So did a lot of like electrical engineering classes, physics, which was not my least favorite class was physics, because it was so not practical. It was not applicable to daily life whatsoever. So it really bothered me. But anyway, I grew up in Montreal and I got to learn French through that as well, which I think has served me really well in my career and just sort of expanding my mind to be able to appreciate the two languages, but also just different ways of looking at things, I think.
I never got the gift of language. My father was a Russian and Japanese linguist.
How did you avoid learning those languages?
I tried. I desperately tried. In fact, I was born in Japan, and my brother's 10 years older, and he was born there as well. So he picked up Japanese, but I never picked it up. And I tried like hell, but languages, I never got the gift of language. But
Well, I feel very fortunate. I mean, being in Montreal is kind of a given that you're going to learn English and French. And so I was really lucky to have been born in that location to English parents. But, I learned French throughout school, and also with parents who had the foresight to make me learn a musical instrument as well. So I'm a big advocate of, learning a language, learning an instrument, you don't have to be a virtuoso. You don't have to, case in point, you don't have to be super, great at the language, but just having your brain be exposed at an early age to different concepts and different ways of thinking about things, I think has really helped me later in life, especially as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get kind of the leadership style in a moment, but I guess, was there an early spark or early interest in just technology or computers in general?
Well, when I was growing up, computers were still fairly new. So I did have like early game consoles, like the Commodore 64 had that. And I remember playing the adventure game, with the little smiley face guy. That was one of my favorite games. You'd like bump into things. So yeah, I definitely was intrigued by the graphics piece of it and the video game piece, like a lot of kids, I think, are. And just like the logic. I'm a pretty logical person. So I think I appreciate like the mathematical kind of rational, like if X, then Y, and like you can make things kind of follow a predictable pattern. So I think that attracted me to computer engineering over other forms of engineering. But there was never a choice. I was going to be an engineer. That's what my dad said, you can be any kind of engineer, but you're going to be an engineer. So you can pick which kind.
I didn't force you to sit there and take things apart and then try to, put them back together and, anything like that. You didn't take any of the early games apart just to see kind of components.
I was never a big tinkerer until university, actually. And at McGill, for my final course there was like a project as your final kind of in your final semester. And I built something in that course, which I had never done before. So I designed a circuit board and assembled all the components on it, bought the component, had to figure out like, where do you even like buy a processor from as like an individual buyer? I'd never done that before. So I remember going through catalogs and ordering parts and soldering it on made a prototype board to build a fidget, which was a physical widget. So I had a partner. He did the software piece in Visual Basic. I did the hardware component. So I built this circuit board, which we then had printed, assembled all the components, soldered them all. And what it did was it had like physical inputs and outputs. Mm-hmm. And when you interacted with them, it, you could see the results on the computer screen through the software. And then you could also interact with buttons on the screen to do things to the output. So I had like a light. So you could like click a button on the screen, the light would turn on like in the actual physical on the hardware, stuff like that. We had a motor. So you could like rotate the motor a certain amount of degrees or speed or that kind of thing. Temperature sensor, read the input, show up on screen. So it was actually used at a McGill course for a number of semesters after that for kids to design, or students, not kids for me now, students to design with and build sort of interfaces and have it like do something in the real world. So that was my most deep involvement in like building something.
How awesome is that though? Yeah.
It was really frustrating. It was a time where I had to like code the processor in machine language, and there was like no debugger or advanced tool. So I had like a lot of trial and error and trying to figure that out. A lot of late nights in the lab at school, for sure.
Wow. Well, that's cool. I mean, it sounds like it stood the test of time, though, I guess, for several semesters afterward as a showcase. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you get through university again, then what's next? What's kind of the first job or activity out of college?
Yeah, the first job I had, this is really going to date me, was as a webmaster. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
That job.
Go on.
For an animal rights group. And I was like a full meat eating, like didn't even know what a vegetarian was, innocent little thing. And I went to the animal rights group and they told me you got to eat a vegan lunch and you can't wear those shoes in here. So I really was immersed in a lot of new things and also learned a lot. So I was their graphic designer as well. So I started to build campaigns for cruelty to animals and all the things that happened in factory farms and to chickens. And I was like, oh, I can't eat this stuff anymore. So that's where I became a vegetarian, actually, through that job. And I moved from there on to sort of more technical roles in support and application engineering throughout my career.
All right, so it sounds like you had a pretty kind of broad brushstroke there, and then I guess what was the transition point away from that job to what was next? Kind of learning the journey here.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sure. So my first startup came next. So I finally got a job after a few months at the animal rights group. I was like, okay, I'm a vegetarian now. I get it. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. I graduated in 2001, so it was not an easy job market. So I kind of took the first thing that I got, which was great. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And then I went to work at a company called Symmetry Systems that got acquired and then acquired and then acquired in its history since, but still exists as a software solution. And it was a universal file viewer. So I was in the support team, and you could view any file at the time. PDF was a unique thing: a PDF, a CAD file, a Word doc, whatever you had in this one software application. And I would travel around the world and install it because it was hosted on-prem. For different companies that were using it, figure out why it wasn't integrated into their document management system, and troubleshoot. My favorite trip was to the UK, which was my first trip to the UK, and I had to drive from the airport to the hotel. And everyone was like, "How are you going to drive?" And I'm like, "It'll be fine. I don't whatever." And the first thing I did when I got the rental car was walk around to the wrong side of the car. And I was like, "Oh, this is not an auspicious start. This is not going to go well." But I didn't get into any accidents. So I worked at Symmetry, and then I got a job offer from a company in Boston that we integrated with, which was Matrix One at the time, which also has been acquired. And I started to work with dev teams building integrations with other softwares. So I worked there for a few years, and then I wanted to go back to a smaller company. So I ended up at Brightcove, which was a startup. I was like employee number 40 something, again, back in support. But I knew I wanted to, at that point, become a product manager. I was enamored with fixing technology and dealing with customers, but the most complex problem seemed to be the humans and how they, internally, how we decided what to build and how to build it. And then from the customer perspective, what did they actually need to help them do their jobs better? So I felt like the product management job was the place to be. So I moved into product management at Brightcove. And do you want me to keep going?
Sure. Yeah. Well, actually, it sounds like at that point, right?
My whole resume.
You got the front end, you got the web, master site. You're doing some graphic, then you get into support, you get into implementation, and then kind of the natural progression is product management, right? And so,
it was great. I could use creativity, right, to solve problems. I could use the engineering to translate with the engineers, what needed to get done or what the problems were, so that they could design the solutions. It really was, and then I get to deal with people who are complex, and so it was very challenging, and I love to learn. So it was great. I worked there for a number of years before going to Akamai, which was a large company. But I wanted to learn. I wanted to get away from the technical when I went to Akamai. It was a technical product, and really learn the marketing piece. So I was a product marketing manager at Akamai for a little while and learned the art of marketing, which is, I very well respect people who do that, but decided that wasn't really my area of expertise. But I was glad that I learned it. And then I ended up at Backupify, where that it got acquired by Datto. Datto did a bunch of things, and then I worked at a company called Alice, and now I'm here at Syncro.
Oh wow! So I feel like we have to go back to Backupify. I think it sounds like there's some stories there, because it sounds like you've got this run of these companies being acquired. So well done, because it sounds like you know how to pick some pretty cool, innovative companies that are being acquired. But I guess take us through your time at Backupify, and then moving into Datto.
Yeah. Well, luckily, the software space has been a good space, I think, for anyone involved in it for that, amount of time. The career that I've had, I've been really fortunate to have it at that moment in time. So at Backupify, I was head of product and design, and support eventually too, before the acquisition. And again, I joined Backupify when it was 40 people, just getting started. I kind of like that size. I think a little smaller, it's a little too uncertain and too many unknowns for me. But that's a pretty good size to start out with, and you get to know everyone. So it was a lot of fun, and we built a lot of things. I worked there for a couple of years, a little over 2 years before Datto bought us, and then we became integrated into their stack. And I tried to feel my way around a larger company, because we went from being 80 people at Backupify when we got acquired to a team of 400 Data was about 400 people at that time. So it was a whole new world to learn. Data was in Connecticut. Backupify was in Boston. So there was physical distance to overcome and figure out. So it was an interesting challenge to be part of being an acquisition. I think it served me later to have been on that side of being acquired when then later Data did a bunch of acquisitions and I got to be a part of that. So it gave me some good perspective, I think.
Yeah, it's always, I think that's well said, because I think that's seeing things from both sides of the spectrum or the table, what to expect or not knowing what to expect when you're being acquired, and then having gone through it, and then, laying out a roadmap or helping the acquiree, transition is in having been through that is probably very helpful.
Yeah, knowing what it feels like. I think when you're in the position of power, right, you're the acquirer, you can easily overlook how it feels like to be on the acquired side, especially it's usually the smaller team, the one who has to kind of adopt new standards or adopt new practices while they're being sort of merged or brought into the fold, however that mechanism is going. So yeah, it was good to see how it felt on the other side.
Yeah. So I guess after Datto, you said, was it next time it was Alice?
Yeah. So I worked at Datto for like 5 or 6 years after the acquisition. I got to do a lot of different things there, learn about MSPs, businesses. And then, I left Datto. I took a little bit of time off. My plan was to travel, but then the pandemic hit. I think that happened to a lot of people who, were looking for a break that year and then like, oh God, can't go anywhere. And it was not a good situation for a lot of people. So I decided to go back to work at a company called Alice, where I was the COO. It's a marketing tech company, so it's a gifting platform. And I learned a lot there. We raised a round, so I got to be a part of that. It was very exciting. And then Syncro came knocking. So I wasn't looking. I was very happy at Alice. But the MSP space came calling again. And I decided to jump back in.
Awesome. So what was it about Syncro that was like, you weren't looking, you're happy, content, and then Syncro comes, and what about Syncro, you guys made you make the leap?
Yeah, great question. I think one, being a CEO has been on my list of things to try. I said, I'm a learner. And so it's one role that I hadn't held that I knew would be tough. But I knew I would learn a lot doing it. And so, that was really attractive to me and how much I could learn. And then two, the MSP space. I was in it for a long time, then out of it, and I missed it. I like tech buyers. We've talked I like logic. I like tangible outputs, right? Like we build a software, it runs people's business, they make money off of it, they pay their bills. Like it's very practical, pragmatic software that grows and runs businesses. Like I like coming to work every day to work on something that like is valuable to folks and that they're using every day. So yeah, I think those two things combined. And then the team. So it was again going back to a smaller company, being able to build that up and get to know everyone really well because it is a smaller team. So all of those reasons were compelling.
Awesome. No, it's again, I think people appreciate the backstory and kind of the journey to where you are. Along the way, are there any crucial learnings, pivotal moments, things that kind of stand out that you look back and you're like, holy cow, that moment kind of made me who I am today? Or any mentors along the way?
Lots. I mean, lots of mentors. I think feedback is really important, right? If you're trying to learn, it's the necessary other piece, right? So you have to try something and then you have to reflect on it. And oftentimes to be able to learn and grow. And oftentimes you need a mentor or someone who's willing to dare to give you feedback in that process. And the more you build your career, the harder I think it is to get that feedback from folks and to find people who really want to help you through that process. So I was really lucky to be afforded opportunities to try and fail or succeed, but to try, do my best, and then get to see the outcomes of that. A lot of people, if you leave a job too soon, you don't necessarily get to see the outcome But I was lucky to stay, at Brightco for 5 years, at Backupify Datto for 8 years. You really get to see like how do these decisions accumulate into good outcomes or bad outcomes, or I need to go back and fix that, and you get to live with those decisions. And really learn from them. And I think mentors are a huge part. I've been lucky to have an exec coach since I joined Backupify. So that's something that the CEO there said, every exec gets a coach. It doesn't mean you're bad. It's just like, you're a basketball player, you have a coach. You're an exec, you have a coach. It's just part of the job. You're going to have one. And so I've actually requested an exec coach in every role since then, because I've just adopted that mentality that if I want good feedback and someone who's kind of objectively just trying to help me get better at what I do, that's a good source for that information, as well as the people you work with and other things. But that is like a sports coach, just my mentality around doing the job.
No, that's awesome. So how would you describe your leadership style internally at Syncro?
That's a good question. You should ask people who are subjected to it. I like to think that, it's like the people I hire. I think, it's important to hire people that are smart, nice, and get things done. So I think my leadership style is that I like data. I like to think that I'm smart, or, I'm good about analyzing it. I'm nice in the sense that it's not just what the data tells you. You have to think about other factors involved, and we have to think about how we care for our employees, how we care for our partners. So it's not always black and white, right? What the data says, we have to think about who's going to impact and how. And then we have to get things done. Like, we need to keep moving forward. We need to learn and grow. So I think that kind of summarizes my leadership style.
That's awesome. So transition, kind of focus on the MSP side of the house for a moment. So, I often ask this question, what's one thing that MSP needs to be thinking about or invest or learn in the near term to prepare themselves for the next 3, 4, 5 years, down the line?
Yeah, it's really challenging right now. There's been a lot of things that have changed over the last couple of years for MSPs, for everybody in the world. So I think it's just a time of extreme change or quick change, quicker than normal, right? Things are changing. I think, security is one of those things that comes up time and time again. I think there's a lot of tools on the market. It's hard to figure out how to piece them together, how to deploy them effectively. What does your end customer actually need or not need to be safe? What do you need for your business to be safe and grow? So I think investing in understanding that landscape, the threats, and what are the trade-offs? Because you can never be 100% safe, right? There's always a new threat. There's always something that's coming around the corner, and then there's always new solutions. So staying on top of that, I think, is really like a make it or break it kind of decision, right? You don't really want to get that wrong. So I think about that a lot. I think partners do too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So if you had to, I guess, forecast out what Syncro looks like, and let's talk about Syncro for a moment. What Syncro looks like in the next, let's do 12 months. Let's start with 12 months. What does Syncro look like in the next 12 months?
That's a good question. There's so much change, and the next year in particular, we're looking at some economic factors. We're looking at, global political stability and all of that. There's the UK, the Ukraine, like you name it. There's factors that we can't really foresee. And Syncro's a global company, right? So we have to think about these things and how it's going to impact our partners as well. So I think, in the next year is clearer than like beyond that for Syncro. We're still small, so we still like to adjust given what's affecting our partners and what's in the market. So beyond that is fuzzy, but the next year for sure we're going to continue to grow. We're a PSA and RMM platform, so we're the core of the MSP's business, and the partners who choose us, we're at the center of that. And we want to make sure that they're continuing to grow, that they're continuing to be secure, and that they can operate more efficiently. So a lot of the features on the roadmap or the growth we have planned in the business all are oriented around how can we make their day-to-day jobs easier? How can we make servicing their customers easier, whether that's communications, showing value, deploying solutions. That is like the core of where we're focused. And our MSPs continue to grow. So we have a lot of folks who are just starting out with their business or just like really starting to invest in the PSA and RMM, and they want more and more features as they're growing. So you'll see us continue to add more features that sort of support MSPs that are growing and are on that journey.
Yeah, I know. I think
enough for you. I could get more specific, but I figure like, people can go to our website. Ian Alexander, who's our channel chief, posted a note yesterday. If you want to know like exactly what's on our roadmap right now, you can go read it. There's no secrets, but we could start broad.
No, that's great. I think you summarize it beautifully in that, a lot of the MSPs, especially on the merging side, right? These are, what you guys provide are like they're table stakes for MSPs, and it's something that they run their entire business on, right? And they're always, I can say the word demanding new features. Maybe you can't say that, but I can say they're always demanding new features, and it's great because it's pushing innovation, and you guys are clearly, doing a lot of things pretty darn well up there, and we see that just out in social. We see it in, on our platform. We see just the positive messaging and what you guys are doing to invest in the channels. I think that's kudos to you. I think your analytical background, your engineering background, it sounds like you've wired together a pretty darn good program there to support your partners.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And our customers are really vocal. So we're not always perfect. I'm not afraid to admit it. I don't think any software company is. We try to be pretty good, but we try our best, but it doesn't always work out. So I love that our customers are vocal, whether it's positive feedback, because that tells us like, hey, we hit the nail on the head, like we did a good thing, or negative. And I think it shows that they care. That's what I always think about. I spent a lot of years in customer support or partner support at Datto, building out that team. And we used to think about it like, on the bad days, when I used to go into work, being like, oh, no, not another thing, I deal with it, whatever, an escalation. I used to tell myself, this is information. Information is good. Like, we can work with this. If the partner cares enough to like spend time telling us about it, working with us over it, it means they're invested. They still feel like we're a partner, even if they're unhappy right now. Like, we can get through this. It's when someone doesn't talk to you or just, just leaves without, without a goodbye or without it telling you what was wrong, that you don't really learn anything from that. So that's the bigger loss, I think.
Yeah. Well, the good news is that we've learned a lot from you on this episode. So I want to first thank you for joining me here this week. I guess where can people find you? Where can people find or learn more about Syncro?
Sure. I'm so glad you asked, Kevin. So our website is SyncroMSP.com. So there's a free trial, no credit card, very easy. You could just look, you could read something. If you don't want a trial, that's totally fine, no pressure. And also, if you want to send me some feedback, you can always reach me at CEO@SyncroMSP.com, and I read everything.
Awesome. That's great. Look, I think we made it. I think we made it through the episode. We had, I had some concerns.
Were you in doubt? Was there a doubt?
I'm always in doubt. I'm making this stuff up on the fly, But no, I'm fortunate to have phenomenal guests such as yourself along the way, making it easy for me. So thank you to you.
Well,
for
it was
that.
fun, Kevin. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everybody joining or tuning in, and I'll end the broadcast. And if you didn't catch this one, certainly catch it on the podcast coming up. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.